Hey there, and thanks for joining me. I'm Misty. Today I thought for our quick how-to project, I would show you how to create texture in your artwork with tissue paper. So for anyone who knows me, I love creating textures. Probably one of my favorite things to add into my artwork. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so the first thing that you're going to want is your painting surface. I have a piece of watercolor paper here. You can also use a canvas or a piece of cardboard or a book or whatever it is that you're using. The next thing you're going to want is some Mod Podge. I prefer the matte one because I don't like the glossy glare on it. And you're going to need some tissue paper. This is just used tissue paper that I got in a gift that I kept a hold of. So this is some tissue paper, and you're going to want to start by crinkling it. You want to crinkle it really, really good and give it some nice depth and texture line. You can also use it flat and relatively smooth, but I feel it doesn't give you as much texture as you kind of want for this kind of project. So give it a good scrumble and then just straighten it back out a little tiny bit. You don't want to get all those creases out. Alrighty, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our Mod Podge. You can also use a acrylic gel or a gel medium if you want to use that instead of a Mod Podge. That's perfectly fine. Both of them will work. And you're going to just put down pretty thin, you don't want a really thick layer of it, of Mod Podge. Over your entire surface. If you have a really big surface, you might want to actually work in smaller chunks. So like do the top of the page first and then the second half of the page. It just depends on how big your surface is, because Mod Podge dries pretty fast and you don't want it drying before you get your tissue paper on there. So this is a tissue paper that I crumbled all up, and I'm actually just going to lay it on top. And some of it I kept, you know, pretty flat. I just have the little tiny creases that are in it. Other pieces I purposely made where it's got really thick, chunky layers sticking out of it on top of it. So now I'm just going to press it all into my paper. And at this point you can use a brayer and you can actually go over the top of it to make sure all your pieces are stuck down. Kind of go like this, just to give it a nice flat edge and everything's adhering. Or if you want, you can kind of leave it, you know, a little more textured instead of using the brayer and just kind of smoosh it down and make sure that it stays where you want it to stay. The point is so that you keep all your little texture lines and details and everything in there. The next thing that I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to take some of these bigger pieces here and I'm just going to glue them down. That way they're not flopping around all over the place. I want them to create a semi-flat texture and be a little stiffer on here. And I'm just going to go ahead and keep doing that on all these little pieces that stick out and move around. Alrighty. Okay, so while those are drying, I'm just going to flip it over here real quick and I'm just going to cut off all this excess. If you want to add a little bit more texture to your front, to your art piece, you can actually take these pieces here and then just kind of fold them up, you know, and make them scrumbly and squunchy and do whatever you want to do with them. It gives it another little added layer of texture if that's what you want to do with it. This technique is also really good if you want to just add pieces to, like say you have like a huge canvas and you just want to add little tiny sections of texture. You can also do this in smaller chunks as well. You do not have to cover the entire surface of your artwork with something like this. Just a couple of different techniques you can use depending on how much surface you want to cover. So I'm just going to keep cutting. And now you have a surface that is ready for some paint or some glitter or, you know, some ink or whatever it is you choose to use on top of there. Another great way to use this, like I was saying, is if you have like a surface that's, you know, a big surface and you just want to cover little tiny pieces. So say this is just a small piece that's already painted and I kind of want to layer it with some texture and lighten down the background color. So I'm going to take my piece of tissue paper and I'm just going to scrumble it up really good here. Open it back up a little bit. And then just like the first one, I'm just going to spread Mod Podge on it in a pretty thin layer. Okay, and then I'm going to take the tissue paper and I'm just going to put it right over the top. Again, some spots I'm leaving really, really thick, and then other spots I'm using really flat spaces. I'm going to go ahead and use my brayer again. Squinch it down a tiny bit there. And then you're just going to want to use that Mod Podge and go back and tack in some of these pieces that are kind of sticking out here. Just so you give it a little more structure and support so they're just not hanging out, moving around everywhere. If you want, instead of going back and doing individual ones as well, you can go ahead and just do each individual ones, and then you can just go over the entire surface. The Mod Podge won't hurt, it'll just create a little tiny layer. That way you know for a fact everything is, you know, solid and pushed down and glued on and it's not going to move around. You can do that as well. And yes, these ones look like little balloons, so don't worry about that. They will flatten back out when they dry. You just want to make sure you're using small amounts of Mod Podge, not big ones, because it is a liquid surface. You don't want to use too much on it or it'll take forever to dry. Or you'll get it where it dries kind of funny. So, and you want to make sure that when you're doing it as well, it's a good idea to push it really, really flat with your brush. That'll help you get rid of some of those balloons and some of those thicker pieces as well. Okay, and then while those are drying, I'm just going to flip it over and I'm going to cut the edges off. If you want to wait until your surface is a little bit more dry to do that, you can do that as well. You don't have to cut it off immediately. Okay. And then as you can see, what I love about this particular technique is that you can still see that color through the background, but you can also see that it's got this weathered, washed look over the top of it. This is really fabulous if you have a pattern like, say, florals or a script or something like an old book page. This is really wonderful because it gives it that really cool, old, agey look to it. And then you could also go back and just add some, you know, vintage ink to it or some browns and sepias and make it look really, really old and vintagey. It's kind of a cool look to it. So next time we will go over how to actually color these and add some color and depth and everything to them. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you had a great time.